What's going on, everybody, and welcome here into the Refresh Network. It is so good to have you here, as always. And today, a conversation that I'm really excited to bring to you with Antonio Sundquist. And Antonio is somebody that I have gotten to know, I have gotten to create with over the last several months, ever since we kind of entered this COVID-19 world that we're all living in. We have been part of some monthly events that are held through Lululemon's Mall of America experiential store. Liz Kruger, a big part of this. Want to make sure we give a big shout out to her, does such a beautiful job organizing these events. But these are monthly events where we talk essentially all things mental health. Really a safe space for all of us to come together, talk about something that I just don't think we're talking about enough. And Antonio was a huge part of getting that whole series up off the ground, asked me to be a part of it, and super honored to be a part of it. And this is a really cool conversation where we had the opportunity to go deeper. You know, we've been doing a lot of these events together, but now had a chance to just really talk one-on-one. And Antonio, a little bit of backstory on him. So he is the co-founder of Activ, and that is a growth accelerator for e-commerce businesses. So he's very immersed in that world, and he's also a big mental health advocate. And he talks very open on his social media platforms in his life about his journey with mental health. And we go in depth on that, on his story. We talk about panic attacks, his journey with those. I know I can relate to a lot of it. I'm sure so many of you out there who have struggled with panic attacks will also resonate with this conversation. We talk about morning routines, what he does in the morning to get himself set up for a good day ahead. Talk about this whole idea of masculine and feminine energy. Loving this. That's a topic that I've just kind of started diving into myself and learning about. And he does a really great job of bringing up some really beautiful points around that. So glad you're here. Let's not waste any more time, and let's dive into the conversation with Antonio Sundquist. Antonio, thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
I think quarantine has been a really cool opportunity for you and I to do a lot of really cool work together and just kind of get to know you a little bit more. But I think this is an opportunity to just go a little bit deeper together and kind of hear more about your story. And I know you're doing a ton of work in the mental health space. And I think I just want to start there with, you know, I know it's kind of a big question to ask somebody to just say, like, explain their mental health story, kind of the journey that they've been on with their mental health. But where do you like to start that conversation when kind of talking about what you've been through when it comes to your mental health?
You know, I feel like over the past couple of years, I've been trying to pinpoint the origin of all of it, and it's through therapy and through other things. It's been quite the journey, but I think I'm still figuring that out.
Yep.
I think on some level, my adoption, so I'm adopted, I don't know if you know that, but my adoption might have a lot to do with a lot of things in my life, good and tough. But yeah, I remember, like, when I was a kid, you know, and maybe you can relate to this. When I was a kid, going to school was like as a very young kid, like for the first time going to school and like leaving my mom was like a really like anxiety inducing thing for me.
Yeah.
And I would get like sick to my stomach, and I would like really just get terrified about leaving, and I would have that separation anxiety from my mom. And I'm sure that could be traced back to my adoption and the separation and stuff there, for sure, the more I dive into it. But I just remember like my early days of school being like, you know, when you get that feeling in your stomach and like your digestive system starts kicking in, and it's just like, and as a kid, it's like terrifying, and you think that something's wrong with you. And so I think like that probably triggered just a spiral of like, for the rest of my life, like, maybe some amount of social anxiety. I'm a pretty big introvert.
Yep.
So I don't really like to be at like huge networking events all the time, or like, I just like don't really care for that. And I think, I don't know, if I trace it back to like when I was really young, that's like the last time I can really truly remember being anxious. And for me, it's definitely anxiety. It's not, I'm not on the other spectrum in terms of like the depression and like the fatigue and all that. It's really like high strung in
Yeah.
my head, thinking about the future, all that stuff. So I think, yeah, when I was a kid, I think that's probably like the
Yeah.
origin.
I can relate to that. I used to have big time separation anxiety with my parents, and then like a fear of, I remember always being like scared of having a stomach ache as a kid. Like
Yeah.
that was always a thing. Like going to school, I was always terrified that I was gonna like get sick or like throw up around, classmates at school and things like that. So I always think it's very interesting to kind of look back at some of those traces when we were a kid, like kind of those little inklings that like, hey, maybe something's going on here. Like maybe this like anxiety thing is kind of starting to creep its head a little bit. And I know for me, it's evolved in many different forms over my life. As an adult, how does it show up for you today?
Well, it shows up for me today in a little differently than it did about like 2 years ago. So like
Sure.
2 to 4 years, really post college. I really struggled a lot with panic attacks,
Mm.
and my anxiety got to a level where at some point, I can't remember like the distinct panic attack I might have had, but I must have had a really, really bad one, to the point where I like felt like I was going to throw up. Maybe I even did throw up. And
Yeah.
I remember like that must have sent me again down a spiral where it's like, holy crap, like that sucked and I don't want to feel that again. So then you like, again, you develop that fear. It's not like the panic attack itself. It's like the fear of having one, and like having one in public, and or being in a situation where you're trapped. And if you, oh my God, like what if I have a panic attack right now? What am I going to do? Like, oh my God, what if people see me like this? And so then
Mm-hmm.
if there was a period of time, it was a very dark period post college where that got really, really bad. And I remember, you know, trying to figure out like grasping for everything I could to figure out what do I do about this? I don't want to live this way. This sucks. Because every time you have one, it's like it's deflating. And you might go a period. There was a while where like I'd go a period without having one and be like amazing. Then all of a sudden you just have one and you feel like all your progress and all
Yes.
your everything you have been building is just completely worthless. And so a lot of it was like panic attacks, really severe, then not having them, and then having a random one, then that's sending me down a spiral again. And so it's been a lot of untangling shame and untangling kind of
Yeah.
rewiring what it means to make progress when it comes to your mental health. And then luckily in the past like 2 years, I've gotten into a lot of mindfulness and meditation, and meditation has probably like single-handedly saved my whole journey. Like
Yeah.
it's completely changed the game, because it's allowed me to like get out of my head and like realize that like you don't have to be consumed by those things.
Yeah.
Like there are other things you have access to,
Yeah.
as we talk about in our events. So I think, yeah, now it's definitely way better than it was. I think it's just because I have this like heightened awareness from meditation where
Yeah.
I'm able to catch it before it gets way too out of hand, and I'm able to kind of like rework it and kind of untangle it before it turns into this like
Yeah.
massive beast.
Well, what I love about that too is that it's not necessarily saying that the feelings of panic or the feelings of anxiety are necessarily just like never going to show up. It's like they still might show up, but your relationship with them now is maybe a little bit different. It sounds like, in the sense that you can kind of observe when it starts to happen, and then you just like it's like your response to it. It sounds like has maybe evolved over the years.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
To go back, I want to dive into the panic attack stuff a little bit more, because I know I can relate to that. I've struggled with panic attacks at certain points in my life. I know a lot of people out there have, and it's so really resonates for me when you talk about that whole idea of it becomes this anticipation of having another one. And I think for people that don't struggle with it, it's hard to describe it to people, because it does become this, like, you're constantly like looking out for signs that you might have another panic attack. And then you go these, my panic attacks used to really start to happen on live television when I was working at Care 11.
Which is like the ultimate terrifying. Like that's like probably the pinnacle. either that or being on stage
Yeah.
is probably, those are probably the two where it's like, okay, live TV and those are the ones you hear about too. So I
Yeah.
hear
Oh,
more.
it was, and I would go through these phases where I mean, every time I would step into the studio, right, I was like constantly terrified that I was going to have one. And if I got through a show without having one, it was like, oh my gosh, like sigh of relief. But those days when I would have one, it was so deflating. Like you said, like it's that feeling of like, dang it, like it's back, it's here again. I have to deal with this all over again. And I remember I would just feel so defeated. How do you describe to people what a panic attack feels like?
Well, I think it shows up in different ways for different people, but I think there are like definitely a host of symptoms that people get. I know for me, like it seems to be a sequence of events. It's the anticipation, and then it's almost like because of that you plant the seed in your brain, and then your brain goes like, oh, okay, we're gonna do that. All right, so now I'm gonna trigger your sweaty palms, your heart's gonna increase.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the ultimate like beast is nausea. When I start to feel nauseous, and I think it's like, and again, when I was a kid, maybe I could have had some, when you're a kid and you throw up, it's kind of scary. So like I could have maybe had something from my childhood that has made throwing up or vomiting super scary, or maybe I had a terrible hangover one day. I don't know, but like something about vomiting and nausea is like the thing for me. It's not necessarily the rapid heartbeat. It's not the dizziness. It's not like really the other stuff. That's like whatever, but it's the nausea
Yep.
that gets me. And so like, yeah, I don't know. It's like I think at a high level for people, it's really just like a feeling of completely not being in control, but trying to tame this beast at the same time. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you're losing control and you're feeling yourself completely lose control, and you build this like craving to want to put the beast back in the thing and like
Mm-hmm.
gain control of yourself again, but you just can't. And you feel helpless and it feels like you're drowning. And for some people, it might actually feel like they're dying. And
Oh, yeah.
and there has been plenty of instances where people have like thought they were having a heart attack,
Oh,
and they're
yeah.
actually not, and they're having an anxiety attack or a panic attack. And so it's like an extreme discomfort, honestly.
Yeah. And it does feel like dying sometimes. I mean, I've gone through many a time in my life where I'm convinced that I have like a heart condition, or I have something, and I've actually gone into the doctor and gotten the EKG done because I'm like convinced that there must be something wrong with my heart. And I think that's what's like such a kind of speaks to the need for these kind of conversations. And I think, to have mental health advocates like yourself out there in the world talking about these things and being vulnerable and being open about it, because way too many of us are out there walking around feeling like there's something terribly wrong with us, when in reality, it's just something that's very treatable, that there's all these beautiful tools of how to maneuver all these things. But unfortunately, we're just not taught those things when we're younger, right? And way too many of us start feeling all these things, and we go to that direction of shame and, kind of turning on ourselves, as opposed to saying like, oh, this is this anxiety thing or depression or whatever it is for anybody. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It just means like, hey, there's some things that we can work on here to help you kind of have a different relationship with whatever it is that you're experiencing.
Yeah. And I want to speak to your Care 11 example too. Like, I think like the world I think that you and I are actively trying to build right now, just by speaking out about this stuff, is imagine living in a world in which someone could have a panic attack on live television.
Hmm.
And it's no longer this thing like, oh my, like I think a lot of the anxiety comes from this idea that we're like in the shadows with all this stuff. And I think with like, imagine a world in which someone could have a panic attack on live TV, and instead of it being this like dramatic thing, it's like no different than like say you're doing a live segment and you're like walking with somebody or whatever with the camera, and it's like, oh my God, I just got a cramp in my leg. One sec, I need to like figure this out quick. Like that's all it is. And for some reason, we've built it up to be this thing that's like different than any like physical or fitness thing or like nutrition thing, as we talk about in our events. Like,
Yep.
so that's like what I'm trying to get at with people is like, I want to live in that world where it's like just a human thing. It's just like a thing that's not scary. It's like, and I think a lot of the work that I've done on myself and that I encourage other people to do as well is like untangling labeling
Mm.
and language. Cause like we've grown up, like when, like, for example, when I was a kid and you would get anxiety going into school, first of all, you didn't really know what anxiety was. So like you get terrified. Oh my God, there's something wrong with me. I'm going to be sick, or mom, I don't feel good today and I don't want to go to school. Well, a lot of that probably was just feeling anxious. And I think, so we've grown up our entire lives labeling these sensations and like somatic experiences to the point where like, it's actually sad because like when you look at, like, take sports for instance, we're encouraged to play sports and like be active as a kid, and in that process, because we're encouraged to do it and we're learning about it, when we get a leg cramp, oh, drink more water. Or when we like get it, like, you know, an injury or pull a muscle, it's like go to PT. So we've like been able to build language that's constructive around discomfort in those areas, but not in the mental health space. Because no one ever taught us, like, okay, when you start to feel, you know, your chest start beating more, or like sweaty palms, or like you get dizzy, or you start to feel nauseous, like, actually, here's what that means. And like, it's not scary. And here's all you got to do to like kind of work through it. And so I've found as an adult, a lot of it is really just like removing all these layers that we've put onto this thing, and we put this mental health thing on this big scary monster pedestal when it really doesn't have to be. And I feel like that's a lot of like the work that we do with these events, and like really bringing that message to people. And I found that in these events, people are like, oh my God, like, actually you're right, that it doesn't have to be scary.
And for people that are watching this or listening to this, Antonio, you started some monthly mental health events with Lululemon, the Mall of America experiential store in the Twin Cities, and just essentially gatherings talking about mental health. You invited me to be part of one several months ago, and I've had the honor of kind of hopping on board and being a part of this with you moving forward. We've done a number of virtual events here throughout quarantine. And so I would, we'll always post when we're having those events, and would invite people to join on to those. And would love to have you be part of that community. We talk about things like sleep. We talk about things like gut health. We talk about, hoping to, in the future here, talk about, how do you maneuver that process of finding a therapist, just kind of a safe space to talk about mental health, and what a cool platform with a company like Lululemon to be able to have those conversations. So just want to make sure people are aware of that. Antonio, how would you say, so you talk about meditation, what else for you goes into managing your mental health on a day-to-day basis? Are there things that you're doing every day to make sure that you're nurturing that mental space for yourself?
Yeah, I think movement and journaling. So again, cliche, but like they work. And I think I actually do this exercise every day called morning pages. So there's a great book. I can't remember the author, but there's a book called The Artist's Way, and it's all about like finding your creativity again and all that. But one of the exercises that I got from that book was this concept called morning pages. So what you do is you wake up, and the first thing you do before you look at your phone, before you do anything, maybe you brush your teeth, but like the next thing you do is like you fill 3 pages of your journal with just stream of consciousness journal. Doesn't need to look a certain way. The grammar doesn't need to be correct. Literally just like boom. Sometimes I end up writing, I don't know what to write. And the object is you don't do anything until you fill the 3 pages. And what this does is it really gets at this idea that you wake up and you flush out all the junk and the stuff that'll clog your brain. You only have so much bandwidth and cognitive bandwidth during the day. And especially like for me, I'm in like a very high strung, startup environment. So like I need to be like on, and I can't have my brain filled with just like junk. And so you get it all out on the page. And then what I do from there is depending on the day, either go for a long walk or I go for a run. And then I do my meditation. So like and this is all before I look at Instagram or check my email or even check I try to like not like go into that world. Because if you start your day with Instagram and like do this for 25 minutes or 30 minutes, first of all, you're going to feel shame. Probably highly likely you're going to feel shame. And second of all, you're like starting your day with other people's energy that you just can't filter yet because your brain hasn't warmed up or woken up and you're not ready. And so that's, you know, you always talk about like a toolkit for your mental health. Like for me, it's really the mornings. Like the mornings have to be, you have to make them super sacred, because if you don't, you're going to be running on a low fuel tank, and you're going to be susceptible to being pulled in all these different directions, and your brain isn't going to be, it won't have the time to put on its armor yet. And by that I mean, like, after I've done that morning pages, I've gotten all the junk out, I go for a run, I get the bilateral stimulation going. That's meditative in itself. And then when I do my meditation, that's like the primer then that like gets me ready to go into the day with this heightened level of awareness. And I almost feel like protected. Yeah. Because like anything can be thrown at me. And because I did the work in the morning and I'm wearing this armor now, like, yeah, I might have like a mini reaction, or you're never going to control your first thing, but at least I'm able to then see, okay, I now know that was a triggering thing. And so like I'm able to bring an awareness to it and create this like separation between me and that thing. And I'm no longer going to be consumed by the news or that headline or, anything. I mean, fill in the blank. And it seems like this year is the year to trigger like literally everything. So like
everything is literally being triggered right now.
Yeah.
I think that's so great. And because it's getting yourself into a space where, I'm always such a big proponent that the goal isn't necessarily to get like anxiety to stop, but it's like putting ourselves into a place where we can like maneuver it when it arises. And so it's like you're doing the work in the morning so that it's like you're propping yourself up for the day so that you can like utilize the tools that you have when maybe you get triggered or something comes up that feels not so pleasant.
Definitely.
Yeah. That's so great. And morning routines, gosh, I feel like that's something I really want to hone in on more, I know, in my life. And I think everybody's kind of trying to maneuver that and figure out what works for them. And I think, but it's so key. And it's such a beautiful conversation to have, because the mornings, there's some beautiful energy about the morning, isn't there?
Yeah. And I used to not be a morning person. Like I used to get a ton of energy at night and like not like waking up early. But then when I started to see the effects of doing it, then I was hooked. And there's also like a conversation that needs to be had around these things when it comes to like something I've been diving into lately is this idea of balancing the masculine and feminine energy in life. And I'm usually like, I have a lot of personality traits like that are very feminine in terms of, and again, for people that don't know, it's not necessarily gender specific. It's more so like the feminine side is like your creativity, imagination, empathy, flow, flexibility, like nurturing side. You need both. It's like yin and yang. And then the masculine side is like the disciplined, focused, like more rigid, more logical, analytical side. And I have definitely traits on this side for sure. But when it comes to like myself and like my own practices, I tend to be very rigid and be my harshest critic, and I bring a lot of shame and all that. And so this past, like since quarantine, I've really tried to focus on cultivating more of the feminine. And I think for a lot of people, when they hear like people have morning routines and like you just said, like, oh, I want to build one for myself.
Yeah.
It's hard not to say that and bring in a flavor of shame.
Yeah.
And what I would encourage people to think about is like, be more, bring more of the feminine in when it comes to building new things in your life. Because otherwise you're going to like, you're going to have one off day and you're going to beat yourself up, and that's going to completely throw you off the rails. Yes. And so I've found like with my morning routine, like, I've done it every day, but there are days where like I might not do it in the direct like sequence of events. And in the past I might've been like, beat myself up for that. But now it's like, you know what, like flow, like I've been focusing more on flow. Like it's more so what's the net here over 30 days? Can I have, consecutive, consistent morning routines? And if I have one off day,
Yep.
It's all good.
Being gentle with ourselves. Yeah. Do you, Antonio, what would you want to say to somebody out there that, is really struggling with their mental health? I really want to make sure that we reach people that are kind of in those places that I know I've been in before. It sounds like you've had moments like that as well along the journey where things feel really overwhelming. And then it's like, how the hell am I going to maneuver this? Is there anything that you want to say to people out there that are feeling kind of the weight of that right now? As they maneuver some pretty intense stuff, whether that's in their mind and their body, their emotional state.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. The first thing being, you're not alone. I think that's the biggest trick that our brain plays on ourselves when we're like dealing with things like this, is we're tricked into thinking that we're in this locked room and it's dark and it's like there's no one out there that is experiencing what we're experiencing. And for me, I know it, like I physically feel smaller when I get anxiety or when I start to panic, and like it feels like my room is like closing in on me. And so I think for a lot of people, it's for them to know that like you're actually not alone. And although you might feel stuck, you're not. Like there's always a direction that you can move, whether it's laterally or forward, or maybe you need to move backward a little bit to move and propel forward. You can always make a move and you're never stuck. And that's the thing that kills me the most, I think, about and it's what drives me to do our events and to speak out about these things, is I'm so haunted by the amount of people that feel stuck out there and feel alone, and so they end up committing suicide. Yeah. And I think that's the epidemic, and the big thing that we need to address as a human race is like, how do we let people know that they're never, ever, ever alone, no matter what they might be going through? And especially this year, I want to speak to that context a little bit too. Like this year, we are collectively being traumatized in ways that you could have never anticipated. And so I almost like want to give grace to everyone out there based on 2020 in general. It's like 2020, like you should never feel alone. Like everyone right now, it's ironic, but as divided as we might seem like right now, as just a human race, we have this common thread that is like linking us all together, and we're collectively experiencing a very similar trauma experience that should make people feel a little more connected and not as isolated as their brain might be tricking them into feeling right now. I'd encourage people to think about mental health in a way where it's look at it from a different lens, and give yourself the grace that no one was taught this stuff. And so it's almost like step one for everybody is like recognizing that, okay, we actually weren't taught these things. So like, let's just start there. Let's not start from a place of like, oh, you're bad because you don't meditate, or there's something wrong with you because you have anxiety or panic attacks. Let's like start from a place of like, hey, okay, we're all dealing with this shit. Like we're all dealing with and trying to play catch up from all the stuff that we weren't taught. And then from there, it's like, okay, what are little baby steps? I mean, like you talk about the toolkit, like what are little things that we can pick up here and there? Let's not try to do all of it. Let's not look at a model citizen who might have a insane meditation practice, and let's like start with little baby steps and see what we can pick up along the way. Recognize that it's a journey and it's not like this thing that you're going to fix overnight. And lastly, recognize that it's like a human thing that's not scary. Like it's just like your body is just full of energy that's moving, and it's not just because you might be feeling like a rapid heartbeat or your stomach might be getting a little queasy. Like that's literally just a message. It's just your body doing its thing. And that's just a sign that you have an opportunity to kind of rewire your brain a little bit and like retrain your body to take a situation that might trigger you down that path and like actually have it trigger you down a different path. And the beauty of the brain is like, again, we might all feel stuck right now, but the brain is actually designed in ways where you can change it. And so I think like some people just need to hear that like we have the agency to do those things. And I think we're grown up, and we're brought up in ways where we think that that's not the case, but it's actually not.
Well, thank you, man, for being open, for being honest, having the courage to like speak out on this, not only today, but just day in and day out. It's been such a privilege to do this work alongside you, and I'm excited for that to continue. So thanks for the time.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Want to once again thank Antonio for taking the time to hang out with us here on the Refresh Network. If you are interested in attending any of our upcoming Lululemon events, we're going to be having them once a month. They are virtual for the time being, free for the most part. Sometimes we do have donation-based classes, but follow myself, follow the Refresh Network, follow Antonio on social media. We are always posting, letting you know when those are happening, and also what the topic is. So would love to see you be a part of that in the future. And as always, be good to yourself out there. I hope you found this conversation helpful, and we'll talk to you soon. Hey, just a heads up that these conversations are not meant to replace work with a therapist. So if you feel you need it, do reach out to a trained professional. We'll talk to you soon, friends.